Now that we've had a chance to get this process down, now we're going to switch it up a little bit and make it a little bit trickier. So now when we look here, we still need to make our t-chart. And our t-chart this time, we need to multiply to 24, but this time we need to add to negative 10. And this is because here we have this minus 10. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at our options. So the first one I tend to think of is 6 times 4. When I take 6 plus 4, I get positive 10, not negative 10. So I say, well, what else can I do that would work to get this? Well, I know that negative 6 times negative 4 also gives me positive 24. But if I take negative 6 plus negative 4, I get negative 10. So that's what I need, which means that my equation is going to be y equals x minus 6 times x minus 4. I could put in the plus negative 6 and plus negative 4, but minus is a much easier way to look at it. So now this is tentatively my solution, but I want to make sure that I check it. So if I go ahead and FOIL, x times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. Negative 6 times x is negative 6x. And negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24. So when I combine my like terms, if I remember my process, and adding the opposite, that means I'm going to get x squared minus 10x plus 24, which is what I started with. So I know that that checks out. Moving on to the next example, we've got y equals x squared minus 13x plus 30. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making my t-chart. I need it to multiply to 30, and I need to add to negative 13. Now, if we start picking up on patterns here, if we need to multiply to a positive but add to a negative, we're going to need to use two negative numbers. So my first thought is 6 times negative 6 times negative 5. But when I add negative 6 plus negative 5, I get negative 11, which doesn't work. So I'm going to cross that out. So then I think, well, maybe I should do negative 15 times negative 2. Because that goes to 30 and 15 and 2 make 13. But if I take negative 15 plus negative 2, I get negative 17. So that doesn't work. Now my next option I'm thinking of would be negative 3 times negative 10. And when I take negative 3 plus negative 10, I do get negative 13. So that works, which means that my equation is going to be y equals x minus 3 times x minus 10. So if I take this and I check it out by foiling, x times x is x squared. X times negative 10 is minus 10x. Negative 3 times x is minus 3x. And negative 3 times negative 10 is positive 30. So combining like terms, negative 10x minus 3x is negative 13x plus 30. And I put the x squared out front, and this does check out to what I have, so I know that it is correct. Moving on. Now we've got here a little bit different. Now we have a change in our plan again. Now this time when we make our t-chart, I need it to multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 1. Now if you think about that, if I need to multiply to a negative number, one of them needs to be negative and one of them needs to be positive. So I'm going to start with 4 times negative 3, because I know that will give me negative 12. But if I take 4 plus negative 3, I get positive 1. So that's not going to work. So now maybe I do get positive 1, so I know I'm close. So I'm going to try switching this. Negative 4 times positive 3. I know that gives me negative 12. And if I take negative 4 plus 3, I do get negative 1. So that means that my equation is y equals x minus 4 times x plus 3. Now, a question might be coming up now is, does it matter whether the x plus 3 is first or second? It does not matter, so please make sure that you don't get hung up with that, because I will be looking to see that your binomials are correct, not that the order is correct. So if I check this, x times x is x squared, x times 3 is plus 3x, negative 4 times x is minus 4x, and negative 4 times 3 is minus 12. Combining like terms, 3 minus 4 is negative 1, so I'll just put negative x minus 12. That does check out with what I've got, so we're good to go. Looking at our final example for today's lesson, we've got y equals x squared plus 6x minus 16. So I know that when I make my t-chart, I need this to multiply to negative 16, but I need to add to positive 6. So if I try, I'm going to start with 4 times 4. 4 times negative 4, because I know it has to be one number negative because of the negative product. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16, but when I take 4 plus negative 4, I get 0. I know that doesn't work. Now some of you are probably going, well, I know what the answer is right. Great, write it down. So now I'm going to say, well, I know that 4 is not going to work. So next one I'm going to think of is 8 times 2. I'm going to make my negative 2 negative. 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. 8 plus negative 2 does give me positive 6. So that means that my equation is y equals x plus 8 times x minus 2. And if I take this, which is my potential solution, and check it, x times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. X times 8 is positive 8x. 8 times negative 2 is minus 16. Combining like terms, negative 2x plus 8x is plus 6x minus 16. If I check that, that does check out, so we are good to go. Now you need to try the 2 U-try problems. Make sure you bring any questions with you to class. One of the big things a lot of you have not been doing lately is asking questions until the day of the quiz. I realize that I'm not going to be in class on Monday, but please make sure you bring your questions to class so you can help each other, as well as be prepared to ask me questions on Tuesday.